Hi troopers, welcome back to Math Pirates. In our last lesson, we explored integer addition and subtraction. But today, we will be focusing on multiplying and dividing integers. In this lesson, we will be exploring rules for multiplying and dividing integers, as well as examples to demonstrate when to apply these rules. Let's take a look at the number line. Do you realize that the numbers on the left are like mirror images of the numbers on the right? The only difference is the numbers on the left have a negative factor built into them. A factor is a number that divides exactly into another number without leaving a remainder. This means that 1 is a factor of any number since 1 divides into any number without leaving a remainder. Let's take a look at the number 4. If we have 4 and we factor out 1 from it, then we'll have 1 times 4, which is the same value as 4, because multiplying a number by 1 does not change the value of that number. But what if we had -4? We could still factor out 1 from it, and the value will not change. We would have 1 times -4. But because the number is negative, we could also factor out a -1, and this would give us -1 times 4. Therefore, since negative numbers have a factor of -1 built into them, to change a number from positive to negative, we simply multiply it by -1. For example, 5 times -1 is -5. 6 times -1 is -6. 7 times -1 is -7, and so on. But what if we had a negative number and we wanted to change it to positive? Could we do so by simply multiplying it by a positive 1? No, we could not. Because if you recall what we established previously, when a number is multiplied by a positive 1, the value of that number does not change. So in order to change a negative number to positive, we have to multiply it by a -1. Thus, we can conclude that -1 works like a switch. So if we have a positive number, to switch it to negative, we multiply it by -1. And if we have a negative number, to switch it to positive, we also multiply it by -1. This then brings us to our rules. Rule 1. When multiplying or dividing integers with an odd number of negative signs, the answer will always be negative. So we simply carry out the arithmetic operation and keep the negative sign. For example, 7 times -1. The 7 is positive and the 1 is negative. This means we have an odd number of negative signs. So we simply multiply both numbers and keep the negative sign, and 7 times -1 will result in -7. What if we had -2 times -3 times -4? All three numbers are negative, which means we have an odd number of negative signs. Therefore, our answer should also be negative. So we simply multiply all the numbers and keep the negative sign. Negative 2 times negative 3 times negative 4 will then result in negative 24. And it's the same for division. So if we have negative 10 divided by 5, we simply find the quotient of both numbers and keep the negative sign since we have an odd number of negative signs. Negative 10 divided by 5 will result in negative 2. Now let's take a look at rule number 2. When multiplying or dividing integers with an even number of negative signs, the answer will always be positive. So we simply carry out the arithmetic operation and switch the sign to positive. For example, negative 6 times negative 2. The 6 is negative and the 2 is also negative. This means we have an even number of negative signs. So we simply multiply both numbers and switch the sign to positive to obtain our answer. Negative 6 times negative 2 will then result in positive 12. How about negative 16 divided by negative 2? The 16 is negative and the 2 is also negative. This means we have an even number of negative signs. So we simply find the quotient of both numbers and switch the sign to positive to obtain our answer. Negative 16 divided by negative 2 will result in positive 8. To make it clearer, we could factor out negative 1 from both numbers. And since negative 1 is a common factor of both numbers, it can be cancelled. And we all know that positive 16 divided by positive 2 will result in positive 8. Let's look at two more examples. What if we are given a problem like negative 6 times negative 4 divided by negative 12? By looking at it, we can decide if our answer will be positive or negative by counting the amount of negative signs that are present. We have 3 negative signs, and since 3 is an odd number, then we know our answer will be negative. Let's go ahead and prove it. Negative 6 times negative 4 will result in a positive 24 since there are an even number of negative signs present in the numerator. Then 24 divided by negative 12 will result in negative 2 since we only have one negative sign, which is odd. How about negative 10 times negative 3 divided by 2? By looking at this, we can conclude that our answer will be positive since we have an even number of negative signs. So we simply find the product of the numerator, which is 30, and divide it by the positive 2, which will result in positive 15. Once you remember these rules, you will be able to solve any problem that requires you to multiply or divide integers. We are now at the end of today's lesson, but before we go, let's do a quick revision.